My name is Sarah Wills. This is my first Bible study at Burke Community Church. And I just want to first say thank you to all my teachers, all the women that have served, and the childcare workers, and everybody that is behind the scenes that has made this happen every week. It has truly been a lifeline for me during a really difficult season. At the beginning of August this year, both my mom and stepdad were admitted to the hospital for COVID, and they passed within a week of each other. The day before my mom died, I was on my hands and knees praying Psalm 91 over them. I knew God's promises. They were in my heart, and I just believed with everything in my heart and soul that they were going to come home, that God was going to heal them and restore their health, and everything was going to be okay. Their deaths brought a surge of confusion and hurt into my heart. I wanted to grieve well, but I was really struggling. I would often come into the heart prep time. I have two littles, so during the week, it was busy chasing after them, and it kept me distracted, but I would come into here, and I would just shed tears, and it was just a time to just release all of that pent-up emotion. As I did my homework and read my Bible study, I felt a cynicism rise in my heart. I was doing the Elijah study, and there were a lot of prayers and promises in that study. The question the serpent asked of Eve in the garden, did God really say that? It kept on popping its little rear ugly head over and over. And I just felt like the prayer and promises of God for Elijah, they weren't meant for me. They didn't coincide with my experiences. And praise God, I didn't stay in that place. And it's like Tim Keller says, our Christian assurance is not based on how much our hearts are set on God, but how great and how unshakably his heart is set on us. And it was during one of our class conversations on the topic of God's omnipresence when my classmate Raj, which I saw in the lobby, she's somewhere here, I will call you out. Raj had a comment that brought to my mind a story, a sermon, and it was a turning point in my grief and questioning. And it really highlights how community heals us during these times. But she told the story of Elijah praying for his servant's eyes to be opened to see the angel armies surrounding them. And in that instant, God answers the prayer, and his servant sees the chariots of fire, right? It's amazing. But I suddenly remembered a sermon I heard once. I think it was also Tim Keller, where he said that the place of this incredible, immediate answer to prayer was none other than Dothan. It's no coincidence that this is mentioned only one other place in the Bible, and that's where Joseph went to find his brothers and was thrown into a pit. You guys know the story, right? Joseph is carried off as a slave, he's in prison, but in the mix of all of that, he comes to save Egypt and his family. When Joseph was in the pit in prison, he never saw angels and chariots. Still, after looking back on his life, he tells his brothers, "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good in order to bring about the lives and to the present result to preserve many people alive." That's from Genesis 50:20. Joseph knew that God was sovereignly directing all the circumstances of his life, even when things didn't seem like it. We can trust that for our lives too. I learned during our first session that my table mate, Evany, was part of a church plant outside of Chicago nearly 20 years ago, where I attended my first women's Bible study in 2015. Leanne was my bar instructor 9 years ago when I was working in Georgetown. God's everywhere, guys. Our lives are intersecting and impacting people in ways we only get small glimpses of this side of heaven. Because of God's sovereignty and goodness, we can trust his promises. I've been thinking back to that time I prayed Psalm 91 over my parents. Because Jesus died and was resurrected, my prayers of protection, healing, and life for my parents were always answered with a resounding yes. Either God was going to heal them and bring them home, or he was going to really heal them and bring them to their forever home. God does not fail us. Even when we can't see or feel it, God is working on our behalf. And isn't that what faith is all about? Priscilla Shirer summed this truth up perfectly during our last video session when she said, "Faith is acting like it is so, even when it is not so, in order that it might be so, simply because God said so." And I've been thinking about that, and Priscilla Shirer points out that God asks, we did our last homeworks, and the last question she asks is, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Or God asked Elijah that. And there have been many times these past few months when I did not know what I was doing. But I'm glad I was doing it here. And I'm glad I was doing it with you guys. And most importantly, I was glad I'm doing it with him. So thank you.